It's 1980. I'm 17 years old, working as a grocery sacker at Food World in Florence, Alabama. Around here, shopping carts weren't shopping carts. They were buggies. And bringing them in wasn't just part of the job. It became an unwritten contest to see who could bring in the most at one time. Time to flare up some machismo. Remember, this was long before those motorized cart pushers showed up. This required brute strength, and what I believed at the time was Olympian dexterity. One afternoon, I managed to wrangle about 30 buggies into one long train. I was sure I'd set a record, right up until the automatic doors deciding they weren't going to open up at the last minute. After that, the management decided maybe 10 carts at a time was enough. Personally, I think they overreacted. While all this was going on, I was attending the University of North Alabama. Attending might be the better word than studying. Truth be told, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. Hoping for a little direction, I visited the guidance counselor. He handed me a book listing all the different careers and how much they paid. Well, thanks. To be fair, he also gave me an aptitude test. It said I leaned toward the artistic side. I thought that sounded pretty cool, right before the practical side of my brain reminded me artists weren't exactly famous for getting rich. Then, in 1982, everything changed. My dad died of colon cancer. He just turned 59 years old. And you know what's strange? That's 4 years younger than I am today. Back then, 59 seemed so old. Now, it doesn't seem old at all. Losing him knocked the wind out of me. Whatever focus I had in college disappeared, and so did my grades. I was going to class, but my mind wasn't. Fast forward to 1986. I was still at Food World, only now I was a cashier. Oh, and I was still in college. Let's just say I was working on my degree sounded a whole lot better than almost flunking out after 5 years. I still had no clear direction. Even if I graduated with degrees in management, marketing, and business administration, I figured I'd probably still end up managing a retail store somewhere in Florence anyway. Then I heard Radio Shack was looking for manager trainees. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could actually see a path forward. So I applied. And they hired me. So I turned in my notice at Food World and reported for duty at Radio Shack in the mall. Man, I was excited. This wasn't just another job. This was the beginning of a career. Back then, you didn't just show up in jeans and a polo shirt. I bought myself a dress shirt and a tie because in my mind, that's what professionals wore. Funny how a 99-cent tie could convince a 23-year-old that he'd finally made it. I got to know the manager pretty well, and for a little nerdy guy, he was pretty cool. That's the only way I could really know how to describe him. A cool nerd. He knew everything there was to know about Radio Shack and patiently taught me the business. From selling Optimus speakers to answering customers' questions about products I'd never even heard of. Looking back, I probably paid more attention to him than I ever did my political science professor. Then there was the famous free battery club. Radio Shack wanted every customer walking out that door with one of those cards. You'd think people would jump at the chance to get something for free. Nope. Most of them politely declined. The few who actually came back each month would walk in and I'd think, finally, someone's here to buy one of those super duper speakers. Instead, I'm just here for my free battery. And out the door they'd go. This happened all the time. Breaks couldn't come soon enough. The second I clocked out, I made a beeline for the arcade. Unfortunately, so did about every other mall employee. I always think of the Star Wars game when I remember that arcade, but the game that really pulled a crowd was that football game with the trackball. You'd see grown men furiously palming that trackball, trying to squeeze in one more touchdown before it was time to head back to work. I don't remember who won the single game. I just remember that trackball spinning 100 miles per hour. The manager who hired me was promoted to district manager, and we got a new manager named Robbie. He was nothing like the first manager. Robbie was focused, methodical, and expected the rest of us to be just as serious about the job as he was. Oddly enough, that suited me just fine. One afternoon, I remember watching Robbie install a circuit board in one of our computers. He had an anti-static wrist strap on, and every one of his little tools laid out like a surgeon getting ready for an operation. Nowadays, we probably pop the case open, shove the card in, and say a little prayer. And if it boots, call it a success. But not Robbie. He wasn't sitting there in silence. He talked with us, grinned every now and then, and looked like he was having as much fun installing that board as the rest of us were watching him. Chris leaned in with that little smirk. John leaned against the doorway with his arms crossed. I just watched. It didn't take long for me to not feel like the new guy anymore. I felt like one of the crew. Whenever Robbie was gone for the day, our standards of professionalism, well, they occasionally relaxed a little. Near closing time, we'd pull the display model of the Radio Shack's off-roader out onto the mall and take turns driving it across the tile floor. Now, before you accuse us of abandoning the store, we never actually left it. We stood right there at the entrance with the controller in our hands, keeping one eye on the truck and the other on the customers. Employees from the neighboring stores would stop and watch. I think they got as much enjoyment out of it as we did. Looking back, I suppose 3 grown men in shirts and ties racing radio-controlled trucks through the mall wasn't something you saw every day. Then Robbie got word. Let's just say he wasn't nearly as entertained as the rest of the mall. I hadn't even been with Radio Shack for a full year before I was told a store in Huntsville needed a manager. Looking back, I don't think they told me just how much I still had to learn. But Robbie believed I was ready, so I packed my bags. There was one problem: my mother. Our house was large, situated on 6 acres in the woods with a creek in front and a spring with fresh drinking water running down the side. It was my parents' Shangri-La. Now it was hers alone. I remember looking into the rearview mirror of the moving truck as I pulled away with the few pieces of bedroom furniture that would furnish my first apartment. There stood my mother in the doorway, waving. I fought back the tears until she disappeared from my sight. I hadn't even been with Radio Shack for a full year when I was offered my own store in Huntsville. My own store. I was 23 years old, and suddenly I was the captain of my own ship. Little did I know, it wasn't the Queen Elizabeth II I was captaining. It was the Titanic. And she had already hit an iceberg. Not long after I arrived, the young lady who had been working there accepted another job. She actually had been hired before I got there, but was already 2 weeks away from leaving. When she walked out that last day, I was the entire crew. Turns out, captaining your own ship by yourself is a lot more work than it sounds. When you're the only employee, all it takes is one trip to the back room. That's when I learned just how portable a Radio Shack portable TRS-80 really was. It left the building. I eventually discovered that customers had a remarkable ability to wait until I walked to the back room before needing immediate assistance. When my district manager came to investigate, he wasn't exactly thrilled. For a few uncomfortable minutes, I got the feeling he wasn't entirely convinced I hadn't had something to do with it. Fortunately, once he saw what I was dealing with, he backed off. Then he made a promise. He'd get me some help, which was encouraging because the only coworker I seemed to have at the time was an answering machine. Even after I finally got some help, the store continued to struggle. There was one problem I could never overcome. My store sat directly across the highway from a Radio Shack computer center. Unlike my store, they specialized almost exclusively in computers, especially business systems. So whenever someone in Huntsville decided they wanted a computer, my store usually wasn't their first stop. Every other month, every Radio Shack had to stop and count everything. Inventory weekend was usually something managers looked forward to. Mine was not one of those stores. This time, it was all on me. I normally closed at 7, so with doors locked on Saturday night in a half-lit store while the rest of the world slept, I counted every speaker, every stereo, every telephone, down to every single battery, magnet, diode. It was 4 a.m. before I had it all loaded into the computer, and it would be Monday before the computer confirmed what I already suspected. Not long afterward, my district manager told me the store was closing. Honestly, I wasn't surprised. Over the next couple of days, something strange happened. Moving vans began pulling into the parking lot. Pickup trucks. Even employees in their own cars. Then, little by little, the shelves I'd spent months trying to keep stocked were emptied as merchandise was divided among the surrounding stores. Looking back, I think the inventory wasn't really an inventory at all. It was the store's death certificate. I was transferred to the Huntsville Mall store as an assistant manager while waiting for another opportunity. Afterward, I made a few more moves within the Radio Shack family. Before long, I realized there was something I still needed to finish. Years earlier, I left college before earning my degree. It was time to go back.